Mr. President, it has been just over 2 years since the Senate voted down legislation that would have repealed the Affordable Care Act. And if we'd voted down the Affordable Care Act, that would have also erased the protections for Americans with pre-existing medical conditions. In the time since then, two things have happened. One, my colleagues from across the aisle have read the writing on the wall. They recognize that the American people support the protections for pre-existing conditions on an overwhelmingly bipartisan basis. And two, the Trump administration released the rule that we're discussing today, a rule that would actually allow taxpayer dollars to subsidize these short-term junk plans that actively undermine the insurance market and jeopardize the one very popular part of the ACA, protecting folks with pre-existing conditions. The truth is, and I know my colleagues, I know Senator Baldwin was here earlier, Senator Brown, Senator Wyden, Senator Murray, have outlined in some detail the challenge around these junk plans, or some refer to as short-term plans. The truth is, these plans don't have to cover things like emergency room visits, maternity care, or other essential benefits. And they once again allow insurance companies to discriminate against Americans based on their medical history. Now, with all due respect to my Republican colleagues, you can't have it both ways. If you support protections for pre-existing conditions, you can't sit by and let this administration dismantle them. You have to stand up and defend these protections. Because, as you know, I know folks back in Virginia are depending on them, and I know constituents in your states are as well. So very shortly, each member of this body will have a chance to go on the record with this resolution of disapproval. Mr. President, I fear that some members of the body have forgotten what it was like before the ACA, when an unexpected surgery or a diagnosis of a chronic illness could mean a one-way ticket out of the middle class. Unfortunately, this is not a hypothetical. Earlier today, a group of us had a press conference where a young woman from my state came forward. She'd had not only her child have an enormous medical condition, her husband was then diagnosed with lymphoma, she was diagnosed with brain cancer. Without the protections in the ACA, she testified that she would not be able to afford health care coverage.
Her time's expired.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent for an additional 3 minutes.
Is there objection? Without objection.
So I'll speed this up, Mr. President. Let me just also point out, recently one of my constituents, a man named Jesse, who received a $230,000 medical bill for his back surgery, unbeknownst to him, he purchased one of these so-called short-term junk plans, only to discover that he now fell into the category of having a pre-existing condition, and this plan didn't cover his challenge. Jesse is one of the more than 3 million Virginians with a pre-existing medical conditions. Nationwide, more than 130 million Americans have pre-existing medical conditions like diabetes, asthma, or cancer. Before the Affordable Care Act, an insurance company had every right to deny these individuals coverage, charge them unaffordable premiums, or terminate their plans. We cannot go back to those days. Unfortunately, this administration has used every tool at its disposal to destabilize the market in hopes that will come crashing down so they can finally repeal the ACA. The rule we're talking about here today is a perfect example, among many others, that this administration has done. They've defunded cost-sharing payments that reduce premiums in Marketplace. They've shortened the enrollment period and cut the budget for outreach navigators, all folks who've helped Americans find a plan that works best for them. Or look at the recent case, Texas versus the United States lawsuit, decided this very week that could overall strike down the health insurance system as we know it, with no replacement plan in place. The truth is, these protections for people with pre-existing conditions, if they're going to survive, we have to have a stable insurance market. Now, we can and should have legitimate debates about 1332 waivers. Certain states have used those in a very productive way. But that's not what we're talking about today. The Trump administration's rule is not a good faith effort to bring down cost or drive innovation. It is a direct effort to undermine the stability of the insurance market, and it is an attack on the viability of protections for Americans with pre-existing conditions. I again know we're going to vote on this CRA action very shortly. I urge my Republican colleagues to support it so folks with pre-existing conditions can go about their daily lives knowing that they'll be protected.